Okay, welcome everybody to the Atheist Society lecture for August 2025. Just a little bit about the Atheist Society. We don't have any formal members, but we do have a mailing list. So you can get on that. And we have a website. We have a very rich website which contains all information about the previous lectures. So anyway, without further ado, tonight's talk is by me. I'm John Perkins, and I'm involved with I'm convener of this group and also um, president of the Secular Party Australia. And tonight, I believe, is a very important occasion to talk about Steve Pinker's book, Enlightenment Now. It is an important book. Uh, it is a defense of everything we stand for as humanists, atheists, rationalists, skeptics, whatever. And it is a defense of the Enlightenment. And what I'd like to do is, first of all, I'm going to go through the book. I'm going to basically give you an idea of chapter by chapter what is in the book. And you'll see as we go along what the purpose of the book is. First of all, Enlightenment Now. I'll give you a definition, what it says in Wikipedia about the Enlightenment. The Age of Enlightenment, also the Age of Reason and the Enlightenment, was a European intellectual and philosophical movement that flourished primarily in the 18th century. Notice they used the past tense. Characterized by an emphasis on reason, empirical evidence, and scientific method, the Enlightenment promoted ideals of individual liberty, religious tolerance, progress, and natural rights. Its thinkers advocated for constitutional government, the separation of church and state, and the application of rational principles to social and political reform. The Enlightenment emerged from and built upon the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries, which had established new methods of empirical inquiry through the work of figures such as Galileo, Kepler, Bacon, Gassendi, Huygens, and Isaac Newton. Philosophical foundations were laid by thinkers including René Descartes, Thomas Hobbes, Spinoza, and Locke, whose ideas about reason, natural rights, and empirical knowledge became central to the Enlightenment thought. So that's what the Enlightenment is or was, past tense. But what the purpose of this book is to say we need it. We need it now more than ever. So this book, The Enlightenment Now, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress, 4 components, by Steven Pinker, seeks to make the case for re-establishing the importance of these Enlightenment principles. He presents numerous arguments, graphs, statistics to show how they have benefited humanity. It was written during Trump's first term. We need to recognize the importance of these principles now, even more. Now, here's just to give you an idea. First, I'll read you the blurb from the back of the book. Okay. Is modernity really failing? Or have we failed to appreciate progress and the ideals that make it possible? If you follow the headlines, the world in the 21st century appears to be sinking into chaos, hatred, and irrationality. Yet, Steven Pinker shows if you follow the trend lines rather than the headlines, you discover that our lives have become longer, healthier, safer, happier, and more prosperous, not just in the West, but worldwide. Such progress is no accident. It is the gift of a coherent and inspiring value system that many of us embrace without even knowing it. These are the values of the Enlightenment: reason, science, humanism, and progress. In making the case for an Enlightenment newly recharged for the 21st century, Pinker shows how we can use our faculties of reason and sympathy to solve the problems that inevitably come with being products of evolution in an indifferent universe. We will never have a perfect world, but defying the chorus of fatalism and reaction, we can continue to make it a better one. So he is determinedly optimistic. And given it was written at the beginning of Trump's term, slightly less reason to be optimistic, yet still, following his principles, I do believe that all the problems that we face as humanity can be solved if we have the determination to solve them. I'll just read you also about the personal bio. Steven Pinker is one of the world's most influential thinkers and writers on the human condition. His popular and highly praised books include The Better Angels of Our Nature, The Sense of Style, The Stuff of Thought, The Blank Slate, How the Mind Works, and The Language Instinct. Now, I'm not familiar with any of those books. His academic field is in psychology, but he has such a breadth of knowledge, as evident here, that he deserves, accolades as a very significant intellectual of our time. Now, I wanted to let you know that I have used AI. I wanted to get AI to see what it could do to help me to prepare this lecture. And so I asked ChatGPT to give me a summary of the book chapter by chapter. And I did, but you can judge for yourself how useful I think it is, because what I'm going to do, in the paper, which I'll put online, what ChatGPT said is in italics. And when I'm quoting ChatGPT, I'll make a hand signal like this for A. This is the AI part. And when I'm quoting directly from Pinker, I'll make this symbol. And but otherwise you can tell I'm just giving my own view, but mostly I'm just giving you, first of all, briefly, ChatGPT's view of the book, and then my own summary, the highlights of the book, chapter by chapter. And it's important to do it like that because you'll miss something, because the breadth of the argument that he's trying to make is very, very wide. Okay, the book's divided into three parts, and the first part is called Enlightenment, chapters 1 to 3. And those three chapters are Dare to Understand, Intro, Evo, Info, and Counter Enlightenments. Okay, Dare to Understand. This is ChatGPT. Pinker opens with Immanuel Kant's rallying cry, Sapere Crude, Dare to Understand, introducing the Enlightenment as the historical moment where reason, science, and humanism replace dogma and deference. He argues that these values have powered centuries of progress in health, wealth, knowledge, and rights through modern media and tribal instincts, though modern media and tribal instincts blind us to this reality. So that's their summary. He refers to a lecture he was giving in which a girl asked the question, why should I live? He answered along the lines of, it wasn't because she was suicidal. You have the opportunity to make the most of your life and you should take it. And the book is designed to back that up and says why. You have this precious gift of life do the best according to these principles. He outlines the basis of his 4 themes: reason, science, humanism, progress, which are basic to the Enlightenment. Reason is the foremost and non-negotiable. What is reasonable, justified, or true must be sought and should be believed. Superstition and delusion must be rejected. The second ideal, science, is the refining of reason to understand the world. The idea of a universal human nature brings us to the third theme, humanism. The thinkers of the age of reason and the Enlightenment saw an urgent need for a secular foundation for morality because they were haunted by the memory of centuries of religious carnage. The Crusades, the Inquisition, witch hunts, and the European wars of religion. They laid the foundation for what we now call humanism, which privileges the well-being of men, women, and children over the glory of tribe, race, nation, or religion. If the abolition of slavery and cruel punishment is not progress, then nothing is, which brings us to our 4th Enlightenment ideal. With understanding of the world advanced by science and our circle of sympathy expanded through reason and cosmopolitanism, humanity could make intellectual and moral progress. Okay, next chapter, chapter 2. He explores 3 scientific revolutions: thermodynamics, evolution, information theory, that fundamentally reshaped humanity's self-understanding by showing how entropy defines physical processes, evolution reveals life's creativity, and information theory rationalizes knowledge. This chapter lays a deep scientific foundation for the Enlightenment optimism. My comment, only brief comment, he does talk a lot about the second law of thermodynamics, which states that in an isolated system, one not interacting with its environment, entropy, disorder, never decreases. Okay, so what it means is that if you build a sandcastle, the natural state of the world, it will crumble. That it would go to a state of increased empathy or increased disorder. And that is the state of the world which we and nature has to overcome. And we do that by the input of energy primarily, which is not a closed system. If you have energy input from outside, then it's not a closed system. So anyway, that he puts a great importance on that. Chapter 3, Counter-Enlightenments. Here, Pinkett traces historical currents opposing Enlightenment values, Romanticism, nationalism, religious resurgence, and postmodernism. He outlines how faith-based authority, collective identities, and skepticism of reason still weaken liberal values, leaving us vulnerable to authoritarianism and nihilism. Reason, science, human progress. These ideals need defending. Populist movements repudiate the Enlightenment. They are tribalist rather than cosmopolitan, authoritarian rather than democratic, contemptuous of experts rather than respectful of knowledge, nostalgic rather than hopeful of a better future. The Enlightenment may have largely originated in Europe and America, but it is universally applicable. We are all human. The most obvious counter-Enlightenment force is religious faith. To take something on faith means you believe it without good reason. A second counter-Enlightenment force is supreme allegiance to a clan, tribe, ethnic group, religion, race, class, or nation. Cultural pride is all right, but forced sacrifice for a malign cause is not. Religion and nationalism are signature causes of political conservatism, and many on the left encourage identity politicians and social justice warriors who downplay religious rights in favour of equalising the standing of races, classes, and genders, which they see as in zero-sum competition. So he's critical of both the left and the right, as he puts it. A further counter-Enlightenment force comes from the doomsayers. People have been forecasting the decline of modern civilization for centuries. It has not happened, and it need not happen, even though, as I said, the publication of Pinker's book, the outlook does look a little bit more bleak. A final counter-Enlightenment force is the disdain for science. Some see coming to terms with great literature a superior enterprise. They see science as just another point of view and condemn scientism. As we have seen in the recent US election result, rejection of science is apparently electorally popular. He goes into a little bit more detail in part 3. Now, part 2 is his step-by-step recitement of how human progress has been made in each particular field and how much we have gained. And it's a slog to get through it, but it's worth enumerating it just to see the magnitude of it. Okay, part 2, progress. Pinker structures this extensive section by metrics of human well-being, each summarized with data-backed optimism. Now, this is going to go from chapters 4 to 20. Chapter 4, progressophobia. He defines progressophobia as the irrational denial of long-term improvements. Media sensationalism, negativity bias, and intellectual trends exaggerate crisis, fostering despair. Countering this is not wishful thinking. It's essential for maintaining democratic institutions and human rights. That's the AI summary. Many people, now, what I'll do after that is I'll give you some quotes and excerpts from what he says in the chapter. Many people who call themselves progressives actually hate progress. Not all the fruits of progress, but the idea of progress. Graph 4.1 shows the tone of news coverage has become steadily more negative over the last 6 decades. Someone's done an analysis of news and classified words as positive or negative, as a mega study, and found that there's a lot more negative words in the news than there used to be. But despite this, during those 6 decades, the world has made spectacular progress on almost every measure of human well-being, yet no one seems to know about it. So let's start. Chapter 5, life. Life expectancy has doubled over the centuries, with gains continuing via medical advances, vaccines, sanitation, maternal care. Disease patterns shifted and infant mortality has plunged globally. Figure 5.1 shows that the world life expectancy has increased from less than 30 years in 1760 to more than 70 in 2020. Improvements in life expectancy, child mortality, and maternal mortality have improved in all countries. Okay, chapter 6, health. Expanding on life, Pinker highlights how public health campaigns, nutritional improvements, and safety regulations have dramatically lowered rates of disease and injury. In the last 150 years, about 500 million lives have been saved by the chlorination of water and vaccines. Chapter 7, sustenance, meaning food supply. Agricultural and industrial revolutions, mechanizations, and global supply chains have all but eradicated famine in most of the world. Even as population has soared, global hunger has declined. Famines used to be commonplace. Comedian Chris Rock observed, "This is the first generation in history where the poor people are fat." True. Malthus was wrong. Food production per person has doubled. Making fertilizer from nitrogen was a major breakthrough. Figure 7.3 shows the percentage of people in developing countries who are undernourished has declined from 35% in 1970 to 15% in 2015. Figure 7.4, deaths from famine peaked at 1,400 per 100,000 and the 1870s to almost zero last decade. Now, I'm talking about the figures. I'm not going to show them all. You can't get through it. But I'm illustrating, whatever he's saying, he backs it up with numbers and graphs to prove what he's saying. He's not making it up. Chapter 8, wealth. Global GDP per capita has surged over 10 times in 2 centuries, with poverty rates falling sharply. Economic growth has powered unprecedented access to goods, services, and infrastructure. Now, I'll point out that when we talk about GDP per capita, it's just another way of saying income per capita. He's using this to illustrate we have 10 times the income we did before. Poverty has no causes. Wealth has causes, according to economist Peter Bauer. Figure 8.1 shows world GDP per capita. It goes from the year 0 to the current day. World GDP capita was doing absolutely nothing for 2,000 years, and then it goes like that. It just takes off. Why? To simplify it, technical progress giving productivity gains, i.e. greater output per unit of input. The Industrial Revolution, the scientific revolution, and better institutions have been the cause. And it is not just the rich who have got richer. Most people now do not live in extreme poverty. Figure 8.4 shows this declining from 90% of the world population in 1820 to only about 10% in 2020. People are not living in extreme poverty as they were. Chapter 9, inequality. Pinker argues inequality of outcomes is less important than rising living standards for the poor. Though inequality measures vary, material conditions for billions have improved and social mobility remains strong. On this issue, there hasn't been the dramatic change there has been in the other aspects previously mentioned. The Kuznets curve proposes that as a society industrializes, income and wealth inequality increases, but over time, social programs and welfare schemes reduce inequality. And that has happened, but then at some stage, things get worse. A certain amount of inequality is inevitable, but it does seem that within countries, inequality has increased in recent decades, particularly at the high end. It is a relevant concept, and it is not inconsistent with the well-being of the poor having also increased. Now, chapter 10 is on the environment, and during this, I'm going to make a little diversion. Now, while acknowledging climate threats, he points to the environmental Kuznets curve, where rich societies reduce pollution as they grow, reforestation, cleaner air, and water improvements coexist with technological solutions. Is progress sustainable? Is there a Kuznets curves where things get better, air, water are cleaner, but other things happen and the environment worsens? World population is slowing and total population should stabilize at around 2075. The concept of sustainability is problematic. The statement, you can't have endless growth, you can't have endless economic growth on a finite planet, is false. Depends what type of economic growth. And economic growth does not measure use of resources. The key point is that with greater efficiency, you can get more production with less input, and less use of material from the environment. So in that, technically, it is possible, as that continues, to have economic growth on a finite planet. And technical progress will continue. We can't foresee what the humans will come up with, but they will come up with something. The biggest problem is global warming. Pinker proposes that nuclear energy and other technology can fix the problem. His pre-2018 analysis is a bit dated. So what I propose to do is show you just some of my own findings on this issue of global warming. I'm going to show you some things that you won't know, and in some ways the situation is better than you might think, but in other ways it's worse. So now you can't really see what these graphs are. You don't have to. I'll just tell you what it's about. Okay. On the first chart, you can see it's the land. There's three components: the land, the air, and the sea. Okay. Now, there are natural carbon dioxide flows that have always occurred between the land giving up carbon dioxide from fires or plants rotting and absorption of carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. That has been going on for billions of years. Likewise, with the sea naturally emits a certain amount of carbon dioxide and it also absorbs it. Okay, so these are natural processes, and those natural flows are quite big. Now, in this diagram, the yellow or orange colored in the bottom of the stocks of the carbon, and the above that it shows the flows up and down. You might be able to see the arrows going up and down. So it's something like this. Well, the pink color is the modern day, like it's basically it represents 2015. So it includes anthropogenic emissions, fossil fuel emissions, and it compares the magnitude of fossil fuel emissions with the natural flows. And here's a key point, is that all of our fossil fuel emissions, well, the natural flows that occur are about 25 times bigger than our fossil fuel emissions. Even though big as they are actually dwarfed by the natural flows. What our emissions have done is upset the balance, because everything was in balance before. The absorption and the emissions naturally were in balance, and now they're not. The second chart on the right-hand side, it's just a graph of showing fossil fuel emissions, CO2, what we've done since the year 1800. It shows you the graph, how much we've done. So what I did was I proposed a way to model those flows. And it's something that actually hasn't been done anywhere by the Global Carbon Project, because I got data from them. On that diagram, there's only 2 points in time. There's current and prehistoric. So what I did was make an interpolation of that data and use it to make forecasts. The graph that you can see with the wiggly blue line and the red line, that is the global temperatures. The blue line is global temperature. And what I have done is fit a curve to that line using only carbon dioxide emissions to correlate with global temperature increase. Okay. And you can see that the red line follows the blue line quite closely, except for natural year-to-year variations. Statistically, the carbon dioxide emissions explain 92% of the variation in global temperature. I will also say that what we have done is increased the amount of carbon dioxide in the air by almost 50%. It's now 442 parts per million. It used to be less than 300. Okay. So in 100 years, we have changed the percentage of carbon dioxide in the air by an amount which has never happened in the history of our planet. There have been a lot of changes in the air, but they took millions of years, not 100 years. Now, I've made projections. How are we going to get out of this mess? All right. We have to get emissions down. Now, one thing you probably haven't heard is that, okay, net zero. What does it mean? Basically, we need to get emissions down. About half the emissions fossil fuel emissions that we put in the air are absorbed by our planet, but naturally. Half it stays in the air and half it is absorbed, okay, by the land and the sea. If we can reduce our emissions by half, we will get into balance, okay? So in one way, it's kind of better than, you think, okay, net zero is probably an impossible target. But if we can just halve them, what we will do is stabilize the situation. But unfortunately, there's a few problems with that. And this graph goes up to 2060. So this is my projection. You can see a slight dip in the pandemic in that blue curve, and then it goes up and then it's coming down again. Now, I've made the bold assumption that emissions are going to start coming down. Well, they kind of plateaued, but every year we think and hope they're going to come down, but they still don't. And just to compare it, this is the International Energy Agency's two predictions. The green one is net zero coming down to 2050, and the other one is similar to mine. It comes down to 0 about the year 2090, which is probably realistic. Okay, I've done this modeling. This is how fossil fuels coming down. That graph shows you the blue is coal, the red is oil, and the yellow is gas. So most of the reduction in emissions comes from getting rid of coal. So I made these equations. I projected the amount of absorption and emissions and how it's going to continue. But the natural absorption, we're relying on the land and the sea to absorb the carbon dioxide to get us out of this mess. What the problem is that shown on this last graph, even when we do get back into balance, and because we still haven't started reducing emissions, we won't get back into balance. That is, we can't, the planet will not be able to catch up with our emissions until the year 2040 at least. But even when we do, the temperature of the planet at that time will not come down, because once it gets back into the balance, the carbon dioxide that we've put in the air is going to stay there. Even though the planet absorbs more, the amount of absorption goes down as our emissions go down. So the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere doesn't decrease. So the urgent situation is we must reduce our emissions as soon as possible, because we're just delaying the point when we'll get into balance. And the point at which we get into balance, we'll be locked into that temperature rise forever. I mean, the only way to get out of it is to bury all the carbon in the ground. All of these reduction schemes, they're not going to do anything. Reforestation, because it doesn't take the carbon out of the system. Unless you bury it at the bottom of the sea, or you fill up all the open cut coal mines, refill them with dead trees, you're not taking carbon out of the system. So we're going to be stuck with higher temperatures. But even so, we can still solve the problem, and there's only one way we're going to be able to solve it, and that is by putting aerosols into the atmosphere. We know it works, and it can reduce temperatures very quickly, and it's feasible. So, that, unfortunately, it is our only hope, but it can be done. So any sort of particulate matter in the air can reflect the heat, reflect light back into the space. We know it works because we used to have a lot of sulfur dioxide in the air from dirty coal. And when it was measurable, the sulfur dioxide actually decreased temperatures. And when they stopped doing it, they used to have acid rain. The sulfur went across the Atlantic and you landed with acid rain in America. But they managed to stop it by not burning the sulfurous coal. But the reduction in that particulate matter increased warming. Scientists have done it, and the most feasible, you either inject aerosols in the atmosphere from commercial aircraft, or they have these machines that live in the sea and have a very high velocity pump, just pump seawater into the sky, and that will form particulate matter. And people are already working on it. So anyway, that was my diversion, because I'm going to go back to Pinker now. He did make one statement which I disagree with. The only thing I actually did, he said that even if we stabilize atmospheric carbon dioxide, the temperature will still increase. I don't think that's true. If we do stabilize it will stop increase, unless there's other factors. Anyway, that was just my comment on his strained optimism regarding global warming. Anyway, let's continue. Chapter 11, Peace. Violent conflict from interstate wars to genocide is on the decline. Well, it was. Thanks to democracy, world trade, and international institutions, the chances of dying in war are at their lowest historic levels. Yeah, unfortunately, this is before the war in Ukraine and Gaza. Figure 11.1 shows that wars between great powers, common for centuries, have declined dramatically since the end of World War II. Battle deaths have declined, particularly since 1990. And I say, well, the wars in Sudan, Ukraine, and Gaza have altered this picture. But I'll just continue on and go through the rest of Pinker's very, very positive analysis. Chapter 12, Safety. Accidental deaths from fires to car crashes have fallen due to engineering and legislation. Risk reduction has improved the life quality across societies. Homicide deaths have declined since ancient times, but there has been little improvement in recent decades. US homicide rates are about 5 times that of England, but are still below the world average. Now, in figures 12.3 to 12.6, he shows that death rates from motor vehicle accidents, pedestrian deaths, plane crashes, deaths from falls of trees and fires and drowning have all decreased dramatically. Like you look at the graphs, they're just plunging, except for deaths from poisoning, which is going the other way. And the reason for that is drug addiction. overdoses. Occupational deaths, natural disasters, lightning strikes, they have also decreased dramatically since 1900. Chapter 13, terrorism. Despite its psychological impact, terrorism kills far fewer people than common accidents or crime. Its risks are often exaggerated in public perception. Figure 13.1 shows that deaths from terrorism have a downward trend since 1970, September 11 being the glaring exception. And I would like to observe that since the decline of the Islamic State, terrorism hasn't become as so popular with the jihadists, I don't think. Chapter 14, democracy. Democracy has spread from a minority of countries in the earliest 20th century to the majority today. Although imperfect, democratic government correlates with peace, rights, and prosperity. Figure 14.1 provides a democracy versus autocracy score from 1800 to 2020. And the graph rises steadily from 1800 to 1920. Then after that, it staggers down a bit until 1970. And then from 1970 onwards, democracy rises again. Deaths from executions have declined dramatically since 1780. Okay, chapter 15, equal rights, another victory. Rights for women, racial minorities, LGBTQ people, and other groups have expanded dramatically. These gains are central to the humanistic thrust of the Enlightenment values. And he gives figures 15.1 and 15.2, which show a reduction in racist, sexist, and homophobic attitudes 1985 to 2025. Violence against wives and girlfriends in the US has decreased, particularly since 2000. Now, what I think is an omission, however, he doesn't show anything to demonstrate what I think is a significant gain in women's rights. There's no graph of women's workforce participation or educational attainment, which I think would show significant improvements in women's rights, except perhaps for some Islamic countries. So I think it's an omission because that is quite a significant change in the human condition. In my lifetime, married women couldn't work. Chapter 16, knowledge. Literacy, education, publications, and digital access have exploded. The democratization of knowledge fosters informed citizens, science, and culture. Homo sapiens means knowing man. Breakthroughs such as writing, printing, and electronic media have exponentiated the growth of knowledge. He used that word. The first countries that made the great escape from universal poverty in the 19th century are the countries that educated their children most intensively. The percentage of literate people in Europe rose from about 15% in 1500 to about 90% by 1900. And now, in most countries at least, it's almost 100%. In England, female literacy was higher than elsewhere. Measured IQ has also increased dramatically from about 1935. Figure 16.6 provides a graph of the growth of human well-being measured by an index from 1820 to 1920. It's a very impressive growth. To behold this graph is to apprehend human progress at a glance. I mean, that basically puts together all the things that show we're so much better than we were. Chapter 17, the quality of life. Quality of life indicators, housing, nutrition, leisure, mental health, have all improved. Contrary to doom-laden narratives, modern lives are more comfortable, informed, and satisfying. Work hours have decreased from over 60% in 1870 to 60 hours per week, rather, in 1870 to about 40 in 2000. That's figure 17.1. The age of retirement has decreased so that in 1880, about 75% of men over 65 were working, but by 2000, it was only 20%. The cost of light in terms of lumen hours has decreased from £15,000 a year in the Middle Ages to £3 per day. In other words, we're in the dark, in the Dark Ages. Some people have said that the invention of the light bulb was the greatest invention of human history. And it is quite dramatic. Look how difficult it was to obtain light at night. £13,000 a year in today's money. Spending on necessity, happiness. Happiness levels remain stable or modestly rising globally. While not driven purely by GDP, most happiness measures improved alongside living standards. Okay, well, happiness is sort of self-measured, self-quoted. Despite all this gain, people aren't any happier, and they still suffer more from loneliness and mental illness. So other factors are relevant, but materially, yes, we are much better off. He looks at, in chapter 9, existential threats. Pinker addresses nuclear war, climate change, pandemics, and AI, arguing that though risks exist, they're manageable with rational planning, scientific literacy, cooperation. He challenges alarmism, advocating reasoned mitigation strategies. He says, forecasts of doomsday and the apocalypse have always been around. He dismisses some concerns about AI as similar to the Y2K bug. In other words, he doesn't think it's going to be such a problem. And he thinks biological weapons and nuclear weapons, those dangers can be managed. So he maintains his optimism. Now, the final chapter in this section, chapter 20, the future of progress. He concludes this part by stressing sustained progress depends on preserving Enlightenment values. Building on progress requires a rational problem solving, institutional resilience, and enlightened optimism. His book started with the proposition that scientific revolution and the Enlightenment set in motion a process of using knowledge to improve the human condition. As the previous chapters show, it worked. Pinker argues that it certainly is possible that it can continue. He does consider some problems. The first he considers is economic stagnation. All human progress and well-being since the Enlightenment can be ascribed to, in economic terms, technical progress by increased productivity, measured by more output per unit of input. This word productivity is popular. They're having a summit next week. Okay. How to improve productivity? I have my doubts whether we're ever going to get back to the levels of productivity improvements that we have had. The reasons for that was a lot of it recently came from the invention of computers, robotics, telecommunications, the internet, all that stuff. We've got it. We've got the gain. There's nothing new like that that's going to come along. AI is going to help, but I don't think it's going to transform us. And another major reason, which economists don't seem to get, why measured productivity is declining. It's because the change in the structure of the economy. In the past, most productivity gains came in manufacturing, but manufacturing has declined in importance relative to services. and services a sector where productivity is low. So, because the nature of the economy has changed, the bulk of it is not going to give in areas where we get productivity gains. So good luck with that. Even if we don't get productivity, look how much we've gained. I mean, we're so much better off than we were. Maybe we should just get used to it. The other major challenge to progress, Pinker cites, is populism. Writing during Trump's first term, he describes authoritarian populism as an attempt to undermine Enlightenment values. Populism, by focusing on the tribe rather than the individual, populism has no place for the protection of minority rights or the promotion of human welfare worldwide. Failing to acknowledge that hard-won knowledge is the key to societal improvement, it denigrates elites and experts and downplays the marketplace of ideas, including freedom of speech and the fact-checking of self-serving claims. Populism comes in left-wing and right-wing varieties, which share a folk theory of economics as a zero-sum competition. Problems are not seen as challenges that are inevitable, but as the malevolent designs of insidious elites, minorities, or foreigners. As for progress, forget it. Populism looks backward to a presumably preferable past. Tries to finish on a positive note. The case for Enlightenment now, by the way, I should mention he really singles out Nietzsche for criticism. The case for Enlightenment now is not just a matter of debunking fallacies and disseminating data. The story of human progress is truly heroic. It is glorious. So that is Steven Pinker's assessment of humanity, what we've achieved and what we can do if we still rely on the principles, as he notes, reason, science, humanism, and progress. Thank you. Okay, before we go to questions, we would like to ask you, if it's possible, if you have any cash to make a contribution to the Unitarians for giving us the use of this hall, which we take for granted, but we do actually greatly appreciate it. Okay, now we've got a question from Ian.
Excellent. Okay. What's been biting me is that the laws of physics dictate that you cannot have growth without increasing waste, increasing use of resources, and increasing climate change. Some apologists have tried to say that you can, and they invoke the term decoupling, which is a complete fiction. Decoupling equals God. There's no such thing. So you cannot have growth without destroying the planet.
Oh, well, yeah, by decoupling, what they mean is the amount of fossil fuel emissions has decreased per unit of GDP. So in other words, we're getting slightly better, but we're still growing to the extent that we're getting worse. Imagine a world where we've got so much energy. The question is the availability of energy, Ian. If we had sufficient energy, we could recycle anything. We wouldn't need to mine anything. We could just totally recycle resources. So even though we've got a finite planet, if the population is stable, we can get everything we need by recycling. But all we need to do that is energy. And, obviously energy is a short supply. Imagine if we did get fusion power, we would be able to solve that problem. We could solve, I think all the problems are solvable. So I really stick with Pinker's optimism, although I have been a bit dampened, but really reading his book, I've resumed my optimism. So I think your worry, I know it's a worry, but it can be solved.
Yeah. Well, we've already got a nice fusion reactor. It's called the sun, and it's 93 million miles away, which is the best place for it.
Did you know that all the energy requirements of the world could be supplied by, forget the area, I think it's about 1% of the area of the Australia, 1% of the Australia covered in solar panels could solve all the energy problems of the world.
Except you haven't got storage.
Yeah,
There's wind and solar are okay, but they're no use without storage.
absolutely. Absolutely. And so human ingenuity, we are working on it. Unfortunately, we're going to have to rely on the Chinese because they're the only ones that have uh, invested in it strategically, and the Americans have abandoned all hope of ever going to ever greening their economy. Next question. Andrew Rawlings, hand up.
Yep. Thank you, John. I'm curious, why did you choose to talk about Steven Pinker and this book?
Well, the reason for that is I think it is a significant book that anyone who, I don't know why it comes out backwards, anyone who counts themselves as an advocate of rationalism, humanism, should be aware of this book. I mean, I did read it years ago, but it's kind of a daunting prospect to actually present all this information. But it is an important book because it states the case. It states the case that we want to argue for. We are atheists, we're humanists because we believe the world will be better if everyone was. And this makes the case that the values on which our arguments are based have proved so successful. And all we've got to do, like his idea is that he wanted to show how successful it has been as a result of humanity adopting these values. But we've forgotten. We don't know. People have no idea. So his idea was to enlightenment now. It's not past tense. We need it now. We need it now more than ever, especially with all of the, well, the lack of rationality, the lack of humanism that we're beset with at the moment. Yeah, so, yeah, yes, Andrew, I do think it's a book that anyone who calls himself humanist should be aware of, or at least the arguments in it, because it's our case. Look at humanism has done. Look at the benefits that the Enlightenment has given us in all of these ways, which is enumerated in detail. So it's a reference of how good it is, how much good it's done. So that's why I think it's an important book. It's a little bit daunting. As you saw, the AI things that I kept indicating, they were helpful, but it doesn't really give you a really good idea without what's in the book, except for quoting little bits and anecdotes and things like that. Let's see now. Well, all right, we'll go to Stephen in the audience first, then we'll go to Ian.
Winning out, you look at China and their attitudes to the West. You look at the Orthodox world, as he put it, Russia and all that. The whole thing is the tribal nature of the world is reasserting itself with tremendous force. And I mean, humanism's ceasing to make any impact. One day, all this marvelous stuff seemed fantastic 50 years ago. I thought it was wonderful. And now we've got drug users everywhere, people sleeping on the streets. I think Pinker was entirely too optimistic.
Well, I can certainly see your point. We are regressing into tribalism. One thing I think, one note of optimism I could try to seize out of all that is that I think Trump will fail, and it will be seen to be fail. His economic policies are going to wreck America. and there'll be unemployment, there'll be inflation, and it will be his fault. And it could be really bad. If there's a financial meltdown, do you remember what happened to Liz Truss? She tried to have a policy of unfunded spending. The bond market rejected it. They wouldn't fund it. And she got tossed out of office because what was going to happen, the interest rates were going to go through the roof and the retirement funds were going to lose all their assets. Now, what Trump's done is just increase the deficit unfunded by trillions, and he's going into more and more debt. And the debt is a problem. The more debt is a problem. And if there's a financial crisis, everything, we will lose everything. The bank, you've got money in the bank, it's gone. Your assets go to zero. Everyone has to sell their house. If you still got a house, you can live in it. But that's why people buy gold. That's why gold is going through the roof, because gold is an asset that does, when everything else collapses, you've still got the gold. It'll have value. But everything that's on paper potentially could lose its value and be zero. So that is a risk. Ian.
Bit to do with religion. Our first talk today was by James Carlton. Does anyone remember the God Forbid program on the ABC?
Rings a bell.
Okay, well, that was wonderful. So he's the son of Richard Carlton, who set up the Skeptics about in about 1980, you might recall.
Okay.
And anyway, the talk was excellent, run by friends of the ABC, and I mentioned my encounter with Rachel Cohn, who was anyone remember Rachel Cohn?
Yeah, the faith of things or something.
Yeah, she was. That's right. She was a great believer, and I got half an hour on her program, which was amazing radio program, and she did everything she could to convince me that my atheist views would get me into trouble. So she, at the end of the program, she labelled me Australia's worst atheist. So I was very proud of that.
Okay. Well, good on you, Ian. Yep. Okay. John's got a question. David.
It's really going to be interesting if there was an, but there's going to be points where the economic reserves of carbon emitting materials will run out. Has anybody done a calculation on that, and what will be the carbon cost of the atmosphere when that point's reached?
Yeah, we are running out. Like, there's still a lot left. A lot of countries have completely depleted their coal reserves and oil reserves, and a lot of the oil has to be either from the sea, underneath the sea, and gas. So we're getting to more and more tenuous supplies of fossil fuels. But we're not going to stop burning it because it runs out, unfortunately. But the temperature increase is going to be way, way too high for us to wait for us to stop burning because we've run out. So we need to just switch to renewables and stop emitting as soon as possible, because as I said, we are locking ourselves in to a cooked world. So we need to do it quickly. Any other questions? Have we had enough for tonight? All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, all the Zoom people. Ian, it's good to see you again.
Fantastic. Greatly enjoyed that. Thank you, John.
Okay. Thank you.